All right, so we talked about how cells divide, how the mitotic process occurs. Well, what happens whenever you get kind of this deviation from the mitotic process or deviation from that cell cycle, that cell life cycle? Um, you can end up with cancer basically, because cancer is a disease where the cell cycle is not functioning properly. So there's some um, malfunction in the cell cycle, and it could be multiple things that is causing a cell to divide uncontrollably. And so, for most eukaryotic organisms, your plant and your animals, to grow and maintain their tissues, they have to control that timing of cell division. So, you don't want your cells to divide too rapidly because then you'll get your tumor masses, or you don't want them to divide too slowly because then you won't have new cells to replace your old ones. So it's very important to have that timing down. And so the events of the cell cycle are really governed by, you can think of like a traffic control system, like traffic stops or traffic cops or stoplights or something like that, where the cell cycle is controlled by these different checks. And these checks you can think of as specialized proteins, or they are specialized proteins. And so, like your stoplights or your traffic cops are your specialized proteins that's checking the cell periodically through its life cycle, saying, okay, the cell's good, it can go on to the next step. Or this cell's bad, it doesn't need to go on to the next step. And it undergoes what's called apoptosis, which is the cell basically killing itself so that the mutation or the bad genes or the bad protein that's in the cell doesn't get duplicated, and that could be an issue later on down the line and could eventually lead to cancer, instances of cancer. And so these proteins are sending those stop and go signals that is telling the cell to continue on through that cell cycle. And so cancer, again, is just basically a disease of the cell cycle. And so when the cells don't respond like they're supposed to this control system, they end up dividing excessively. They uncontrollably divide, and they end up potentially invading other tissues of the body, depending on the type of cancer and how severe that variation from the normal cell cycle is. And generally, the cells will undergo some sort of genetic change in the genes that encode and build the proteins that control the cell cycle. So basically, you have a traffic cop that's not really doing its job because of a mutation that's not allowing that protein to work appropriately. So it doesn't catch a cell that is mutated or that's abnormally growing and lets it go through that cell cycle and divide. And then you'll have two copies of that cell. And then it does it again. And then you all of a sudden you have four, and then eight, and then 16. And then you can see how that can get out of control very quickly. And so when those cells divide excessively because they've made it past that control system, that leads to the development of tumors. And so these abnormal masses of body cells that can occur. And if those cells stay in the location that they originated, we refer to that as a benign tumor. So it's non-cancerous. However, if the cells start to spread into neighboring tissues, then they could form new tumors and start developing, cancers in other parts of the body. Those are referred to as malignant tumors. So if you have a malignant tumor, then you're said to have cancer. And the spread of cancer from its original site, so let's say a person has lung cancer, and that cancer then spreads to their liver. That is called metastasis. The cancer has metastasized. So it's begun to spread out of its original site. Malignant tumors, so you can have cancer that doesn't metastasize, but it does start invading adjacent areas and tissues of the body, and affecting those functions. So you can have a benign tumor that stays in its original site and doesn't affect neighboring cells. And you have malignant tumors that start to do that, and that's your cancer. And up to, depending on the type of cancer, it can go from generally 1 to 4 in terms of the stage. And generally, a stage 4 is what we refer to as a metastasized cancer. And so, just to kind of show this process, breast cancer is really common. It's one of the leading killers of women in terms of cancer, and it's a very serious deal. And so, here we have an example of breast cancer where a tumor has started to grow in the tissue. And if that tumor stays in its place, doesn't move into surrounding tissues, then when that's known as a benign tumor. However, if it starts to invade neighboring tissues, like we see here, and really becomes abnormally shaped, then that is a malignant tumor. And this is now classified as cancer. If that tumor then starts going to other parts of the body, say it enters the bloodstream or the lymphatic system, it's then metastasized, and it could travel to other parts of the body and start growing tumors in other locations like the lungs, the liver, the brain, etc. And that's generally, like I said, generally that's what we classify as stage 4, but again, it can depend on the type of cancer. Okay, so some ways that we tend to treat cancer are through surgery, so where we go in and try to physically remove the tumor, and that's can be done before it's metastasized more often, whenever it's kind of in that location still, not really left the original site. We also can combine surgery with radiation therapy and or chemotherapy. So radiation is where you take radiation. So remember we talked about isotopes. So that radiation, same thing, will that high energy radiation will be exposed to the cancerous cells in hopes that the cells are destroyed. And it doesn't allow for any more of those cells to replicate and grow. Chemotherapy is where you insert drugs into the body to hopefully kill and disrupt the cell division and the cell cycle of those cells that are cancerous. And you can use this to help get at tumors that have spread throughout the body, because it can access all the tissues in the body, whereas radiation, you pinpoint it at one location. You don't want to just apply radiation to the whole body. You generally just want to do it in one area, because the radiation is also not only killing the cancerous cells, but it also kills the normal cells too. And so you want to minimize your area of radiation. And so treating cancer, you can use one of these, or you can use multiple combinations of these types of therapy or treatments. In terms of looking at future cancer treatment, one of the big things is immunotherapy, where they focus on boosting the body's immune system to help attack the cancer cells, to identify the cancer cells and to attack them. There's also immune components that are looking at being synthesized and created in the lab and then put into the patient to help get rid of those cells. And a lot of research, cancer researchers really think immunotherapy is kind of the place for cancer treatment right now, and trying to get that breakthrough and really helping to treat cancer. But individually, we can try to do things to help prevent cancers from developing. So like not smoking, making sure you exercise, making sure you don't get too much solar radiation. That sun radiation can cause skin cancer. Make sure you eat a high fiber, low fat diet to prevent things from like colon cancer, that stomach cancer, that sort of stuff. Being aware of your body, doing self exams, just kind of feeling your body and making sure there's no lumps or tumors in any location is a good way to help identify these things early, because if you can catch them early, it kind of helps your survival chances and chances of kind of beating the cancer itself. And then also regularly visiting your doctor to try to help identify those cancers early. Okay. And so this video went into the discussion of, what happens when you deviate from that cell cycle, that mitotic cycle, and how it eventually can lead to the formation and development of cancer. In the next video, we're going to talk about meiosis, so the development of our gametes, our sperm and eggs. And we'll also talk about what happens whenever meiosis doesn't occur properly and how that can lead to some disabilities and diseases that we see in humans today, and also in the past as well. And so we'll see you in the next video.